All right, so welcome to my third episode of Talking's Not Dead podcast. So on this episode, I have my friend Sid. We are talking about, I will say the topic is a little bit intangible, but basically it's magic and fantasy and her journey watching and enjoying those things. So we get into the media that she watched when she was younger, kind of what got her into it, her journey through that media, what got her to enjoy it, her eventual journey into D&D, where she and I became friends, and we talked about some D&D moments and what we liked about it, and just things generally of that nature. A bit spoiler here, we talked a lot about Labyrinth, so if you have not seen that movie, you might want to watch it before you watch this podcast. So remember, please be kind in the comments. No one that I've talked with in these episodes are experts on anything, so just keep that in mind. All right, let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, so my first question I wanted to ask you, what made you choose this topic? Now, today we're talking about fantasy and your journey into fantasy. What made you want to choose this
We're
topic?
talking about magic, baby.
Yes.
So you asked me if I want to be part of this podcast, and sorry, everybody, my dog is inserting herself into the situation. You can see her little nose right there.
That's okay.
Um, you asked me if I want to be a part of this podcast, and I said, "Yeah, bro. What's the topic?" And you said, "Anything you want, as long as it's something that you like to talk about, and you don't really get to talk about a lot." And I was like, "Bet." So I was thinking about it. I was like, what is something that I could talk for an extended period of time about and it would be interesting to other people? We'll see how that second part goes. But
To be
I
determined.
was thinking, yeah, to be determined. But I was thinking magic
Mm-hmm.
because, Bryce, you and I are both fantasy sluts. So I
Mm-hmm.
knew
Mm-hmm.
that at least you and I would both be on the same page. And I freaking love magic. So
Mm-hmm.
that is where we arrived at this topic.
There you go. So, what was your experience with like magic or fantasy? Like, what was the first thing you can remember experiencing? What was your first time?
So that is a very good question. I was telling you a little bit about how I was going to go with
Mm-hmm.
this topic, and the overarching theme is magic, but it is also about my origin story as a fantasy slut.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the way we were going to start, we had to go back. We had to go back to the 1980s to the Jim Henson movie Labyrinth.
Oh, that's a
Yes.
classic.
Yes. So it is
Classic.
so funny that you would ask me, what's the first fantasy memory you have? I don't remember the first time I watched Labyrinth. I have
Mm.
no recollection of a time that I didn't love Labyrinth.
That's just a
And
core part of your being.
it's a core memory. It's a core part of my being. Everything else was built around it. And you know what a long memory I have. So
Mm-hmm.
for me to say I don't remember something, that's deep.
That's a big deal. It cuts deep.
It's a big deal. Um so yeah, one of my first memories I've ever had was sitting in my living room, doing something at my little coffee table and watching Labyrinth. And
Mm-hmm.
the music written and performed by David Bowie came up, and I went, "Yeah, it was," because I freaking love David Bowie.
David Bowie's
As a
awesome.
3-year-old, I love David Bowie.
I can definitely picture 3-year-old you saying that.
Hmm. Oh, yeah, it was. First husband as well.
There you go.
That was my man. At the time, I did not realize how tight his pants were or how unfortunate his hair was. I know now, though. I know now. At the time, I was just transfixed by the bopping 80s beats.
That's fair.
So definitely there. Definitely we started with Labyrinth and also the animated Lord of the Rings movies. So
Oh,
my
okay.
dad was a huge nerd. My mom called him a daywalker because because in high school he played football. He was offense and defense, but he was also really big into Dungeons and Dragons
Oh,
and
really?
Lord of the Rings. Yes, and that was way before it was
That
cool.
yeah, that's before
Yeah,
its time. That's very odd to hear from his time.
yeah. In the 1980s, my
Football
dad
player. That's
was
crazy.
mhm, was a 6'3" football player with a full beard that all the ladies loved, and he fucking loved Dungeons and Dragons and Lord of the Rings.
Wow.
So I definitely have my pedigree strong.
Yeah, a trendsetter, if you will.
Yes. The Rankin and Bass Lord of the Rings movies are also ones that I don't remember the first time I watched them,
That's fair.
but they had a huge impact on what I liked in media.
Hmm.
Because while I was thinking about well, what are we going to talk about? I was thinking about how Labyrinth very fantastical world, and like that's one thing. You and I both fantasy sluts. There's a fantastical world, we're in. Elves are involved. You son of a bitch, we're there.
Yes.
And I know this is not true of you, but for me, I almost exclusively read fantasy. So if I'm
Okay.
watching something, that's a different story. I can get into a whole bunch of different genres. But if I'm reading a book, if there's not magic, the odds are so high that I'm going to read it and go, I could be reading something with magic and then just stop.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that definitely started when I was just a wee lass, just a young sapling,
Mm-hmm.
watching Labyrinth and over watching the Rankin and Bass Lord of the Rings. So, and I noticed that with both of those, they were fantastical worlds, there were fantasy elements, and music was a big part. So, yeah. So, David Bowie wrote all of the songs in Labyrinth. It's not a musical, but they do use musical numbers.
It is very strange, I will say.
Yes.
Like, not a movie that when you first start you would expect, perhaps, to
No,
break out
definitely
into
not.
musical numbers.
Definitely. And with the 80s dance break,
Yeah.
immaculate, incredible. So it's not a musical, but it does have bopping musical numbers. And David Bowie wrote all of them. And I think he performed all of them except for Chilly Down. He might have had a
Okay.
little thing in there, but all of them were him. So huge, like in the DNA of that movie, music's
Yeah.
a huge deal. And the Rankin, but all the Lord of the Rings for some reason likes to do songs.
Mhm.
And that I still get bopped to Where There's a Whip, There's a Way,
Mhm.
and Funny Little Things or 15 Birds.
Mhm.
I will still to this day just put them on loop and listen to them. And that is definitely where I got my love of like the deep bass voice.
Mhm.
So it's super melded my idea of what a good fantasy time was
Mhm.
and what good music was.
Okay. Well then, so that's kind of like our baseline, right? So like,
Mhm.
just to kind of start us off, in as much or little detail as you want, describe your story to becoming a full-on fantasy slut. Let's just do like the broad strokes right now. So you started there. Where did you
Yeah.
go, and where did you end up?
Okay, so started with Labyrinth. Loved everything about it. Did not quite understand how tight David Bowie's pants were. Um,
Gotta make sure that's an important detail.
yep, it is. Bryce, you need to watch it again if you're not remembering how
I
tight
do
they
need to
were.
watch it again. It's been some time since I've watched that, but I was a full adult when I watched it, so I I do need to rewatch it though.
But yeah, that was super impactful. Like we talked about how the type of media that I'm doing,
Hmm.
super rooted in that. It's also kind of paved of the 10th Kingdom and Merlin. Those were
Mm.
both like late 1990s, early 20th century, or
21st century,
2000,
2000s.
or
Yes.
yeah, early 2000s. There we go. Uh, like miniseries fantasies,
Hmm.
and I love them so much. And I think you would actually like the 10th Kingdom as well. And I own it, so we can watch it together.
Okay, I'm down. I've not watched that. No.
Excellent. Um, so we started there, and then my dad, obviously huge nerd, so he laid the groundwork for the things I like. I remember being 8 years old and being hype as hell to go
Hmm.
to watch Return of the King in theaters. I left a voice recital early so that I could go do that.
Priorities straight.
Great, that is the movie that Aragorn has hair in a ponytail. It was life changing. So my dad, super into it, and when I would go over to his house, he would tell me stories from like the Silmarillion or his D&D campaigns.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so it was usually when we like had errands or stuff to do, and I requested them. I would request them over and over and over. I heard the stories from the Silmarillion so many times. I thought that the story he told me about the D&D campaign he was running, it wasn't homebrew. It was
Mm.
like an adventure path that they'd
Yeah.
played together. But I was like, that's the coolest fucking thing. What do you mean? And I was really surprised that he didn't get me into D&D like while I was at home,
Hmm.
because freshman year of college, first thing I do, I go up for Bobcat Day, where you
Yes.
just like, yeah.
Yeah.
Went up for Bobcat Day. First thing I did was find the D&D club, and I
Hmm.
was like, take my email, let me know when you
Yeah.
guys are
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is where my D&D story came from.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was playing with the D&D club, but then, you know, kind of how clubs go, where it's like ebbs and flows
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
productivity. And then our home slice, Yogev, who has been talked
Yes.
about on the show before.
Yes, and will be a guest at some point in the near future.
What a nerd. So he asked me if I wanted to play in his campaign, and I was like, hell yeah, brother, let's do it. And that one, you know how D&D campaigns go, kind
Mm-hmm.
of ended. But
Mm-hmm.
then he started a new one,
Mm-hmm.
which was set in his setting, Sumera. And that's where Morin came from.
Yes,
So for you know Morin well. You
I
know
do. I am
Morin.
very familiar.
Yes, but for the audience at home, please don't walk through my thank you. Um she was the first charisma-based character I ever played.
Mm-hmm.
She was, because I was used to playing Wisdom Nature bitches, but I was like, you know what? For this one, I want to try something different. And
Mm-hmm.
she was a half-elf bard, and just so much, just such a lady.
Yes.
And so obviously her DNA very magical.
Yes.
And what I thought was really cool about that campaign was I'd met Clarista before, the other player.
And by the way, if you
And
don't know, I was also in that. That was the
yeah,
D&D campaign
we're
that I
gonna get
also
there.
played in, just to make sure we're clear. So your home slice was in there. Morin was the character that she was playing, and then we had a couple other players, and people came and went as we went. But to start, it was just you, me, and Clarista.
hmm So with that one, I'd met Clarista before, but none of the three of us talked about our characters or
No,
yeah, no.
not at
At least
all.
with me and Yogev, we didn't really talk about too much what the setting was.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of came to him with a character idea and he said, "All right, let's tweak it here, let's tweak it there. All right, now you fit."
Mm-hmm.
Um and what I thought was really cool was without having that really deep in-depth discussion between the players or between the players and DM, we all came up with characters that just slotted perfectly into the world.
Yes.
So, yeah. So, and you can say what happened with Alonzo, your
Sure.
character.
Yes.
But with Morin, I came up with something. I was like, yeah, her mom was a big magic guy. Um, you know, after her husband died, she kind of
Mm-hmm.
threw herself into her work, and then she saw something that she wasn't supposed to see.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, she was doing magic stuff. She saw something she wasn't supposed to see, and then just kind of spent the rest of her life in a daze.
Mm-hmm.
And Yogev went, "Oh, bet dream addling."
Yes. Yes.
That was I did not collaborate with him before that. And then with you, I know that you were like, "All right, richest elf family around, uh, gets expelled for." I'll let you get into how many details you want. But
Sure.
gets
Yeah.
expelled, yeah.
Yeah, basically, his whole shtick was that he never really fit in, and his parents were kind of the worst. And basically, he had a brother who was kind of like the family, like the crown jewel, but Alonzo was not really doing what he was supposed to. Or at that point, his name again. There's a lot of
Yeah.
details here.
Just call him Alonzo.
Yeah, Alonzo, his little brother, the family was into some weird occult shit, and they're like, well, let's sacrifice our firstborn son. That'll solve all of our problems. Of course it will. And in doing so, they accidentally sacrificed the crown jewel, the other brother, on accident. And it was a whole thing. Alonzo thought it was his fault, so he fled. He got in with the wrong people, and then became the rogue. You know what I mean? The archetypal rogue, if you will, almost kind of, except he would like loathed himself all the time. And yeah, it was weird because like again, I don't think that Yogev can be understated in this. Like I think this is in no small part to like how good he is at world building and stuff like that. Is that all of our characters slotted in so well. Like he had this city called Proven, and he was like, okay, well I have these 12 families that are like the big families. Let me slot you in, dog. You're good. And then it's like I like it was like a puzzle piece that like. But the thing was is that like Yogev had an entire board of puzzle pieces, but that could like your character could have been slotted into the puzzle at any moment, if that makes sense. So like I think if I had created a barbarian or if I had created a wizard, you know what I mean? Like whatever I'd created, I think Yogev would have had a puzzle that would have slotted in somehow. You know what I mean? I do, however, think while that's true, I do think there is something magical about what happened with all of our characters that is on top of that, if that makes sense. Like there was something
There you
different.
go.
You know what I mean?
You got me where I was gonna go.
Yeah.
So absolutely, Yogev is amazing world builder and like incorporating people into the story.
Hmm.
But he told me, like, and this is where I kind of got this, oh, that was really cool
Hmm.
idea from. He was like, yeah, the three of you all made characters that just fit in.
Hmm.
So he might have had something going on with the Baldies that like there was something else. And he went, actually, let's just scrap that and
Yeah.
throw Alonso
Yeah.
in there. But the framework you gave him for what Alonso was, the framework I gave him for what Morin was and what her story was,
Hmm.
and what Clarissa gave him for what Riri, her character was, he said that they all just accidentally.
Yeah.
So I thought that was magic.
Yes.
So you got to me. You
I
got
got
me
it.
there.
I got it.
And so it was like, this was the first time we'd met. I
Yes.
had not seen your face before I'd heard your voice for like months.
Yeah.
Because we played over Discord and we didn't use
Technically.
Huh?
We sat in biochem together, but
Oh, that's true.
like
That's true.
we didn't really talk that much, and like I vaguely knew your name. That was about the extent of it. But yeah,
Yeah. We did technically have biochem together, and I think you were mostly sitting next to Jesse, and that's why I did.
Yeah, it was literally me, Jesse, Yogev, and then you. So we were like the furthest apart you could possibly be. And I was never formally introduced to you. I don't recall. I just remember you sitting with us, and I was like, okay, this is happening now. And then I basically kind of didn't pay attention to you a whole lot after that because I was like, okay, this is happening. And then it wasn't until later when we were playing, I was like, I know her somehow.
Yeah. I'd say that's another magic. Like we did meet,
Yeah.
but neither of us like it didn't sink in.
Yeah.
So my idea of you was a blank screen that lit up green because you were talking over Discord.
Yes. Similar.
Yeah. So we didn't talk at all about our characters, and one of the most, for me, magical details about Alonso was you picked his name, and then you picked the country in Yogev's world that he's from.
Yes.
And that country, Pravin, just so happens to be based on Renaissance Italy.
Yes.
And Alonso's an Italian name.
Yes.
And I love that. To this day, I love that.
Yeah. Not planned at all.
Yeah. So,
not planned
magic.
At all. Yes.
So, that's going to bring us to when Alonso met Morin.
Mm-hmm.
And they are magic.
Yes.
So we didn't meet before we started playing. We definitely did not talk about our characters together or how they might interact. But they just developed such an incredible relationship.
Yes.
Like, you and I would talk about it outside a session, and we're like, oh yeah, for sure. Any timeline, any alternate universe, they find each other. Yeah. They just have to.
Yeah, I think that was the most fun character work I've ever done as a player or as a DM, I think. A high of which I would say I'm probably still chasing. Because it's very rare that you get, even in like written media, but like I think even in like, like an improv D&D session where like you're playing a character that, none of us are like professionals or anything. And
it was your first time ever playing.
It was my first time ever playing. Yeah, no, that cannot be understated either. But yeah, the backstories, the characters, the personalities, and the issues all came together to form two characters that I think really needed each other. And yeah, it was just like without a better term, it was a magical connection experience. It's fun.
Yeah,
a lot of fun.
And we talk about how like they're both huge clowns.
Oh yeah, the fucking worst. The worst.
They're both enormous clowns.
Yeah.
But they had each other's back.
Yeah.
So they had 360 degrees of vision because they covered each other's weak spot.
Yes.
Yes, and I just absolutely love them to death.
Mm-hmm.
And I still think about them. We haven't played since 2020, 2021.
Yeah, it was like mid-pandemic, I think, wasn't it?
Maybe.
I'm pretty sure it was 2020. I'm pretty sure it was mid-pandemic because, and this is actually crazy to me. Like the second campaign went on for like 2 years. I was playing that, which is crazy to me. It does not seem like it. Like I think it went on longer than the first campaign, but the first campaign holds a lot. I don't know. Your first is always something you remember, I guess, in anything. But I don't know. The first campaign holds a very special place in my heart.
Yeah, definitely, and definitely inspired us both creatively. Like you
Yes.
started writing your like what silly little things happened to Alonzo after the
Yes.
curtains fell. And we were talking about it one day and we were like, oh, he for sure met her dad and
Oh
just
yeah.
doesn't remember it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a
And
very just casual meeting. Wouldn't have thought anything of
yeah.
it, but yeah, that was cool.
And when I was writing that, I was like, this dude, like Waylon's making a really big impact on Alonzo right now. How's he
Mhm.
just gonna forget this guy? Because like Alonzo feels safe right now. That's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
And then while I was writing it, we kind of got to the part where it was like something was said in passing about how Waylon works for fancy people.
Hmm.
Like, how long are you gonna keep doing the bidding of fancy people or whatever? And
Hmm.
Alonzo in his head went, "Oh, he works for fancy rich people," and
Yeah.
that explains everything I thought was weird about him.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then in his eyes, Waylon wasn't special anymore, and he
Hmm.
just like slipped from his head.
Yeah.
Little did that fool know.
Right. It's
But
amazing.
yeah, I just and of course, the real magic was the friends we made along the way
Always.
because we met 2018?
Yes. That's when the campaign
It's
started.
2023 and we are still home slices.
Anime warriors forever.
Yeah, bro. I'm here to save the day with the power of friendship.
Yes.
I'm here to save the day with literal magical powers.
Yes.
And I just really love magic.
Yeah.
And I really love the movie Labyrinth.
There you go. So, I think that kind of gives us a good broad strokes here. So I do have a few more things I kind of want to fill in. So
Yeah.
you talked about Labyrinth. You talked about the Lord of the Rings animated movies.
Mhm.
Um, between the period of that and Dungeons and Dragons in college, was there any other like fantasy or magic media that you would say that shaped you? Anything that you can think of in particular that was impactful besides those, or was it pretty much was that kind of like was it like a bit of a gap?
Much. I'm kind of slow to pick up new media,
Hmm.
so I don't know if you've seen the truly horrendous BBC Lion the Witch and the Wardrobe movies.
I have not. Um,
I own all of them. They're not good, and I love them
oh
so
yeah,
much.
yeah.
I love them. I like them because they're very, very faithful to the books. So
Hmm.
I was watching the first one, the actual Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe movie, not the Chronicles of Narnia, and it was like just so happened I was also rereading the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I was like, wow, this script is directly from the book. So
Yeah.
that made me very happy.
Hmm.
And it also, going back to how Labyrinth shaped my media tastes, it's Jim Henson Workshop Creations,
Hmm.
and those have a really distinct look. Not like just the
Yes.
Muppets, like Jim Henson
No,
Workshop.
it's a very distinct style.
Yeah. So that's where my love of kind of practical effects came in, not so much
Mm-hmm.
special.
Hmm.
And with like the newer Chronicles of Narnia movie, all of the talking animals are CGI.
Yeah.
In the old ones, they are all people in costumes.
No way. Oh my
Yeah, they
gosh.
are.
That's
Look,
insane.
sometimes we have a bipedal wolf, and that's just how that
That's
is,
just how it has to be.
just how it has to be. So like the Chronicles of Narnia movies, love those books. Horse and His Boys, one of my favorite books. Magician's Nephew is one of my favorite books.
Hmm.
Um, the kind of early 2000s, late 1990s miniseries like Merlin,
Hmm.
love that. I think you would really like the story between Merlin and Nimue.
Hmm.
I was called it the Death Kingdom. When I was little, I was illiterate, but in the hearing way, I thought the
Okay.
10th Kingdom was called the Death Kingdom,
There you
and I was
go.
very insistent about that.
Yeah.
But the 10th Kingdom, I think you would love that. Wolfie
Hmm.
is an absolute treasure. Love him so much. Love him to death. And he loves Virginia, and I think that's where you would get straight on board.
Sure.
But like we both really love the movie Stardust.
Yeah, that's a
It's
great
just
movie.
whenever something big and magical comes out, you son of
Hmm.
a bitch, I'm in.
Yeah.
So I'm currently trying to figure out my feelings about the Harry Potter franchise,
Hmm.
but that was also another big one. Um, just anything where there's an excuse to do the impossible with the power of like rigorous study or just like
Hmm.
natural talent. I'm here for it,
There you
especially
go.
the rigorous study.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. Recently, I don't know if anything's come out. I'm a big fan of returning to the favorites.
Yeah, the classics.
So we might currently be in that gap,
Mm-hmm.
but I just really love fae and fairies.
Yeah.
And can we, for a moment, talk about, while I was thinking about this topic, unearthed the absolute core of my love for the fae?
Sure.
Okay, so going back to Labyrinth.
Sure.
All roads lead back to
All
Labyrinth.
roads lead back to Labyrinth.
So I'm gonna give, you know the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But I'm gonna
Yes.
give a little bit of description for anyone that hasn't seen it.
Sure.
So the main antagonist is for sure the antagonist. He's played by David Bowie, and he's the
Tight
Goblin
pants.
King. Tight pants, unfortunate hair, wild eyebrows. My husband, number one, till the day I die. So he's played by David Bowie. He's the Goblin King, and the core conflict of the movie is the main character, Sarah, is having a teenage moment.
Mhm.
She says something she doesn't mean, and in her defense a little bit, the thing she didn't mean was, I wish the goblins would come and take you away right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit different than the be careful what you wish for.
Right, right.
But she wishes the goblins would come and take her little brother away. Bryce, you'll never guess what happens.
What happens?
The goblins do come and take Toby away right now.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy. So the whole premise of the movie is Sarah is trying to get through the labyrinth to get her little brother back.
Mm-hmm.
Can I help you? She also probably loves Labyrinth, even though she hasn't seen it.
That's fair.
And Jareth, when he initially appears before her, is scary because he just appears. He was an owl, and now he's not.
Mm-hmm.
And then also he throws a snake at her.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. And
Buck Wild
he's
even.
like, what's that is Buck Wild. Absolutely out of this world. And she's like, hey, before that was just a prank. I would like my little brother back, please. And he says, what's said is said. Like, you gave him to me. He's mine. And she's like, okay, but like for real, can I have him back, please?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a very famous moment from him. He's like, okay, if you can make it through the labyrinth to my castle and get him back in 13 hours, you can have him. It's not a yes or a no. It's up to you, man.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole movie is her trying to get through the labyrinth in that time frame and get her little brother back. And Jareth is spending the whole movie trying to make her not do that. Because it's never stated in the rules that he can't interfere. It's never stated that he can't take off time or put her into a fantasy magical hallucination world.
Right.
It's all fair game.
Right.
And what I thought was so interesting that I didn't get until I was older was at the end during their like final confrontation, he says that he's been generous. And she's like, how have you been generous?
Mm-hmm.
And little me was like, also same. What?
Yeah.
Because the whole movie, he's trying to frustrate her. He's trying to get her to give up. He's trying to trap her in an oubliette. Oublier in French means to forget. You put someone in oubliette to forget about him. So all this is just like, what do you mean generous? You took away her little brother. You won't give him back. And he says, everything. He said, you wish the baby was gone. I took him. You cowered before me. I was frightening. I've turned the world upside down and I've done it all for you. And Sarah is very much into fantasy. She's very much imaginative. And she starts the movie out like solo LARPing in the park.
Right.
And the thing she's solo LARPing is at the end of the movie, their final confrontation. So Sarah built up in her head this whole, and she knows it's not real, but Sarah built up in her head this whole fiction, this whole alternate universe where...
And she kind of got it.
Yeah. And that is exactly how Jareth was generous. He gave her exactly what she wanted, and he did a lot. But I just thought that was such a so interesting way to view things, because on the face of it, what do you mean you were generous?
Yeah.
But then he goes through it and he's like, without saying, I gave you everything you wanted, everything she'd created for herself, everything she did want, he delivered.
Right.
And, ooh, Now I'm still here for the Fae.
So that perspective, that unique look on a situation or the world is kind of like what drew you, would you say?
It's more just I love things that are impossible. It's kind of
Mm.
like how when I'm playing when I played World of Warcraft or when I played D&D, I
Mm-hmm.
don't really understand why people want to play humans because you can
Mm.
be a human all the
I
time.
see what you're saying.
Yeah, but definitely for why I still love Fae
Mm-hmm.
and fairies spelled Faerie,
Mm-hmm.
like not
Mm-hmm.
the kind of
Yes.
like romantic view of fairies. I think that
Yes.
we have more in America.
Yes.
Um, that
Differences.
definitely that definitely stemmed from I was generous. How?
Yeah.
And then a crazy, totally twisted, very Fae view of the events of the movie.
Okay.
It's just so interesting to me.
Interesting. Well, so let's talk about well, I guess a quick question. So, would you say when you were younger and now, would you say that you generally consume like magic and fantasy media more as like books and novels? Is it more TV movies? Like what is your main source, or is it kind of like whatever you can get your hands on?
It kind of depends. Not every book I read is fantasy.
Mhm.
Really into Agatha Christie recently.
Mhm.
Did you know she's a really good crime writer? I wonder if people know about her.
Mhm.
Um, uh, Definitely all like the vast majority of the books I read are fantasy,
Mhm.
or set in very old English settings because
Sure.
I just like that, I guess. But for things I watch, most of the things I watch are with Yoga.
That's
So
fair.
whatever he puts on, I'm gonna watch it.
Mhm.
But when he's trying to sell me on the idea of something, he
Mhm.
definitely leans into like, it's got Faye, it's got well-spoken bastard men.
And you're like,
What'd you think?
I'm
You son of
in.
a bitch, I'm in.
Sign me
I'm
up.
there.
Okay.
Um, but like if something, and we've talked about this before about how being really into fantasy, it's so risky when you pick up new media because either it's gonna be
Yes.
awesome or it's gonna be the worst thing you've ever seen or
That is just
read.
true. That is just true.
Yes, so when
The
something
problem.
kind of so when something kind of strikes the balance of like it's well thought out but it's not taking itself like too seriously.
Mhm.
Ooh, I'm in. Mama, I'm in.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about your transition then from like enjoying Magic and Fantasy to finally playing in a D&D, session campaign, right? So you're transferring
Mhm.
this the enjoyment that you have into other hobbies or activities, right? So, um, you were primed for it, right? Which I actually didn't know this.
Yeah.
You were primed for it, like it was like your destiny all along. You said to pick up the lightsaber, you know. But so this didn't happen for you until college, until you were an adult.
Mhm.
So Bobcat Day, for anyone who didn't quite catch it, was like kind of our like the club kind of thing day where like everyone was kind of like there. It was like
Yeah, it's like a new students day where you
new
can come
students
check
college
out
day. Yeah.
what's up.
Were you going into that like, oh, I want to play, like I want to find a D&D campaign? Find like, had that been something that was in your mind, or was it more of a you found this club and you're like, oh, that would be cool, let me sign up? Like, how did that kind of transpire?
I don't because I knew about the D&D club before I got there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was like I'd been doing some deep dive in research about like what was available or
Mm-hmm.
if it was in the little, hey guys, come meet all these clubs that are going to come out.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew they were there and I was like, I'm going to go find them. And I
Mm-hmm.
did. So it was definitely something I was really interested in getting into,
Mm-hmm.
but I sort of started doing like fantasy roleplay type stuff even way before that
Oh,
because
interesting.
my dad was super into World of Warcraft,
Okay.
and I was a huge daddy girl. If he was into it, I was also going to be into it.
Fair.
We we shared the same account. It was his account that he let me make a character on,
Okay.
and at least back then, two people from the same account couldn't be on at the same time. So one of us would be on, and then we get kicked off, and we try to get back on, and then we get kicked off again. So we'd call and be like, "Hey, are you on right now?" Yes.
That's so funny.
Yes, and we had to ration our WoW time.
Oh my
But
god. That's so funny.
but with my first ever character, it was crazy. Usually when you get into something new, you kind of have to like shop around a little bit,
Mhm.
figure out what you really like. I got it in one. My first ever character was a night elf ranger,
Mhm.
and I did it because I was like talking to my dad. I was like, "Hey, what's a good one? I want to do druid." And he was like, "It's pretty hard since it's your new character. I'd say start out with something a little bit easier. Go with a ranger or hunter. Sorry, is the actual title.
Mhm.
Go with a hunter." And I freaking loved it. And
Mhm.
my dad had a character that was a night elf druid,
Mhm.
and we would in universe RP.
Mm.
So my character was the daughter of his character, and he would send
Oh.
me mail. Yes. He would send me mail with like, here's gold, here's supplies. He
Oh
was
my
doing the full
gosh.
dad thing. Yeah. So the first time I played D&D, they just like wanted to get started to kind
Yeah.
of get into the game and see how it was going. So
Mhm.
I or I ran a pre-generated hero. So it was
Mhm.
Harsk from Pathfinder 1.
Okay.
Also, Pathfinder's better than D&D. Fight me. Um,
Check back to episode 1 where we talked about problems with D&D 5e.
yeah. Uh, so that was the first character I played, but then the first character that I like made, I basically just made my WoW character, and that one didn't run super long. We kind of jumped into something else,
Sure.
but the I like kind of had the last minute come up with something. So I was like, all right, she's a wood elf ranger, and she adventures because her dad's a wood elf druid, and he also adventures, and there we go, we're in
There you
it.
go. We're in it.
So my first original D&D character or Pathfinder character was my WoW character.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's an interesting transition. Okay. So do you think that like joining the D&D club was a good start for you? Like would you have rather have just started with like Yoga asking you? Do you think you would have said yes if you didn't get to join the D&D club and Yoga was like, "Hey, join my campaign?" Like what are your thoughts on
For
that?
sure, I for sure would have joined his campaign even if he wasn't like even if I hadn't already dipped my
Mhm.
toes in.
Mhm.
I'm really glad I joined the D&D club.
Mhm.
I think my favorite like D&D moments were definitely playing Alonzo and Morin with you, but I think that was probably the most fun I've had playing D&D
Mhm.
cuz it was a little bit sillier, but it was also like a good introduction to
Yeah.
this is how you role play, this is how you do this, this is how whatever.
Mhm.
So it was structured,
Mhm.
but you weren't locked in. So
Yeah.
I could just have fun messing around with stuff, meeting new people, having a
Which
good time.
which is as I've talked to more people, I think is what like people like about D&D is when it's a little bit less structured. They don't like it when it's like when you get bogged down. One thing I talked about in my first episode was that sometimes the rules can kind of shackle you from being creative. And
Mhm.
there's an argument to be made about like trying to be creative through the rules, right? But it's like sometimes it just kind of locks like you just can't do a thing and it makes it so you can't be creative.
For me, it was more like Black was talking about how when you're having like huge multi-year campaigns, you
Yes.
kind of get restricted by
That's
the
fair.
narrative
Yeah.
and like you kind of have to do the thing that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, since it was like the first campaign I played, I think we just ran like 4 sessions before it
Yeah.
kind of petered out.
Yeah.
So, we got a good introduction to the different wacky things that you could do in
Right.
D&D. We were following like a storyline. We were trying to track down
Mhm.
this lady that had stolen a thing and
Mhm.
whatever.
Mhm.
So there were things to be invested in and take seriously,
Mhm.
but also the DM would just like, "You guys meet some fae on the side of the road.
Sure.
There you go. Why
The
not?"
the wackier side.
Yeah. So I really like that that was my first exposure to D&D. Good experience for just like I'm in a new place.
Yeah.
I went to a party because I met people in D&D club.
There you
I'll go to
go.
parties.
There you go. That's so funny. Um, Bit of a good segue from earlier. Do you have any favorite D&D moments you want to share? Anything that comes to mind? You don't have to pick just one. You can pick a couple or whatever you want to do. I don't want to put you on the spot, so you don't feel like you have to like pick like the one. But anything that comes to mind that stands out could be from our
Couple greatest
campaign,
hits.
could be from anything.
Yeah, I have a couple greatest hits from that first one where I was playing Harsk. Um, there was one time that the friend I went to the club with, he rolled and I rolled. He wanted to steal something and I wanted to catch him stealing something, and we both rolled 2s.
That's
So I
funny.
feel like that's very good
That's
stuff.
beautiful. That's beautiful.
And then there was another guy that was in our group that he just solved everything with sausage and war stories, and it always worked. Like every single time.
That's amazing. I
Whenever
strive
he
to be
ran
like
into
that.
conflict, he was just like, "Hey, you're an old soldier too, right? Let's talk about that." Or, "Hey, you want some sausage?" And it always worked.
Hey, that's all you need is some sausage and some
Yes.
war stories to get through anything.
But for like the actual like, because you know how I do. When I get into a narrative, I get into that narrative.
Yes.
Um, I just love anytime Morn and Alonzo just had like a moment where they
Yeah.
were connecting,
Yes.
because they were so good.
They were really good. They were a lot of fun.
And when Alonzo was asked like, "Who is she to you?" his only answer was, "She's my Morin.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know what she is. She's just
Yeah.
Morin.
She cannot be classified.
She cannot be classified. Don't let the fact that she's a bard fool you. She's just Morin."
She's just Morin.
And
That's only for distraction. Okay, that will only serves to distract you.
but I think one of the really good moments for me was, for everyone that doesn't know, Alonzo got corrupted by demons a couple times.
Casually.
And this one must really.
Yes.
And one of the first time he did it, he wasn't really sure what was happening. He just knew that he was having bad dreams and he was pretty just unsettled. And Morin's go-to move, pretty much with anything ever, was to use the spell Soothe. What it did mechanically was heal you and give you a bonus against like fear saves.
Yeah.
But she would use it just in the world to like help people feel better, to soothe them.
Yeah.
So one night, Alonzo was clearly not having a good time. He was in his little bedroll, not having fun. And Morin sat down next to him and just kind of started like running her fingers through his hair. And she was singing and she was casting Soothe.
Yeah.
And you asked Yogev, like, does it help? It's like, no, it's not going to help you make that save. It's like, do I feel better? You do a little. You do. And I don't know. That was just really special to me.
Yeah,
It was a really special moment.
No, it was good. I think that serves to show that sometimes the mechanics aren't everything. And I think sometimes the story of the characters, like doing what the story of the characters like makes sense, even if it doesn't always help you mechanically, can sometimes be more worth it in the long run.
Yeah.
Sometimes that sticks with you more. You don't always remember the save you got advantage on or you got a +2, but that's something that we both remember.
I also remember, this one's a little bit more of a deep cut, is I was talking to Yogev about like, who would Morin marry? Like, what kind of guy?
Yeah.
And it was a really simple criteria. He chortles at her nonsense.
Yeah.
Because she would tell you, the things I say are not that funny.
Yeah.
If you're laughing, like, gut laughing at me, you're just trying to get into my pants, and I'm not here for it.
Yeah.
But if someone hears what she says and just kind of goes, they were paying attention.
Yeah.
And they like what she was they were picking up what she was putting down.
Yeah.
And the only character in all of the campaign to do that was Sabras Crowley.
Yes.
And I went, ooh, wow, she's gonna wipe the shit out of him. Yeah.
Very disappointed we never got to see that relationship fully expand and see what could have been. That is one of those. There's a lot of what could have beens in that first campaign that I would have loved to play out. That was one of my biggest ones.
I feel like at the very least, he definitely sat down with Alonzo and he was like, how do I get rid of her? And Alonzo went, you don't. You have a Morin now. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
She just showed up at his house with baked goods for his staff, but also him if he wanted it.
Yeah. It's terminal. You have it for life.
Have it for life. I'm sorry. One of your life. She might die before you. Who's to say?
Yeah. Okay. Those are some deep cuts. Those are fun. We should get together and talk about just some other time. Talk about like all the memories from the campaign one, because we haven't talked about that campaign enough in a long time.
Bryce, we're so good at making characters.
You know, one thing, this is just a side thing for me, is that, like our current D&D campaign that I DM, we just finished session 70 and we stream every single one. and they don't get many views. But what I like about it is that we can go back and like clip things that happened, or we can go back and like what happened here. We go back. It doesn't happen all the time, but like having that record is really nice. I would have loved to have that for campaign 1 with you guys.
Yes.
I wish I could go back and view some of those moments, like have like actual video footage. Because there's so many moments, I'm sure, well, maybe not you, but at least I probably have forgotten over the years, just because of time, So, next question.
Your next question.
Next question. How would you say your journey has affected your personal relationships? You talked a little bit about how, you went to a party because you were in the D&D club, which is not something that you would normally do. You talked about, how you and I are still going, strong as friends for 5-ish years. I'm not sure the exact date or not. But what would you say? How has this affected your personal relationships?
I mean, the things you mentioned were like it introduced me to people that I'm still friends with.
Mhm.
So, Bev and I, we kind of fell off. Like we still talk all the time.
Yeah.
But there was a period of like
off.
3 But there was a period of 3 years where Gav and I talked every single day. So definitely if I didn't have like D&D to talk to him about, if he wasn't my DM and I wasn't, being an anxious tryhard trying to understand things,
Yes.
then we wouldn't have had that inroad to I go see him twice a year. He comes up to see me twice a year.
Yes.
So that definitely, and like we'd met before that. We were both in the honors program. So we met then, and then I don't know if you know this, but I spent the second year at home.
Yes, I do know.
Did my second year of college. Okay, yeah. And when I went back in my junior year, I saw Yogev, and he was like, I feel like I haven't seen you in a long time.
You've told me this story. I do remember this. story. That was so funny when I found out about that. It's like, yes, Yogev, it's been a year.
I wasn't here. And he's like, oh, that would explain that.
That does feel like a very Yogev thing where he's like on the cusp of being ultra like perceptive, but like in his being almost perceptive, he's not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's a very Yogevism, I would say.
So, if we didn't have that D&D to be, like, talking about and trying to figure things out, then it could have definitely been, like, I feel like I haven't seen you in a while. It's like, yeah, I haven't seen you in 10 years. Like, what do you mean? But now I'm best friends with his dogs and his lizard. Yes. He won't tell you that I'm best friends with his lizards. He won't admit that to himself, but it's true.
Yes.
So definitely in that way. It also, I got to get my friends into D&D. So I played a little bit in college, and then on my year home, I was like, hey nerds, because all D&D is improv and math. And all my friends are theater kids. Yeah. So I was like, hey, do you know what you guys might really be into?
You get a theater kid into D&D and they go hard, dude.
They go hard. So I'm not a very good DM. I'm definitely a starter DM. But I was able to get my friends started. And now one of my friends plays all the time. He has multiple groups that he'll DM, that he's a player in.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So that was really fun. And it also just, like, gives you things to talk to people about.
Yes.
Because I think we've talked about this before. There's no wrong way to play D&D.
No, there isn't. There is, if you're not having fun.
Yeah. I was going to say, as long as you're having fun and you care that other people are having fun, you're playing it right.
Yep.
So there's just so much to talk about when you see somebody that's into D&D. Like, some people might be really into the roleplay aspect.
Yes.
Like, I want to know all about your character and their backstory. If you have a 12-page backstory for your character, I want to read it.
Yes.
I want to read it so bad. But also, if you just want to talk about, like, game mechanics and talk about, like, how this update changed this or how you can crazy min-max something, I'm going to be super impressed with your technical knowledge of it.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of inroads.
A lot of facets.
When people know about D&D. And I think it's something that everybody should at least try out, because maybe it's just a silly, goofy excuse to get together with your friends. Maybe you really want to be in... maybe you really want to get involved with, like, a super deep narrative and epic fantasy. But I think it's a really good just creative outlet and good social time.
It is.
Some people do just Yeah, use it as an excuse to get together with their friends.
Yeah, I know my friend Mag does that. And, one thing for me was it was a big thing was, I was living with a bunch of my friends in college. We all kind of had a house together. We all kind of had our own rooms and everything. And there was a period about probably into our third year of college, second year living together, where we were all still friends. But, when you live together with someone for a long enough time, it kind of like your relationship can change and, everyone gets busy and things are just different. But then we played a D&D campaign every week. We all got together around our ping pong table that was mine, and we played. And all of a sudden, like, we would talk to each other throughout the week about the D&D campaign, and we would talk like, and it wasn't even a very narrative focused. Like, it was a very silly, goofy campaign, but it was just a lot of fun. And we started talking. It gave us something to talk about again, and almost like reignited our friendship, I would
Mhm.
say. And shout out Daniel if you're watching.
Oh,
I'm still.
Daniel!
What's up, Daniel? I'm good friends. I'm good friends with all of them still. We don't talk as much, but I still really appreciate those friendships a lot. I still talk to Dante fairly frequently. So it's like, I don't know. I think that was really important. I don't know how our relationships would be now after college if we didn't start that D&D campaign about our last year of college together, which is really cool.
Yeah, so me being really excited about magic and magic systems and whatnot led me to D&D, which is very full of magic. And I'd say that the real magic was the friendships we made along the way.
Excellent segue. What do you think we can
Thank
learn
you.
from fantasy and magic as a genre and take with us into the real world?
Okay, so you know that I'm a huge like conservation nerd.
Yes.
We at work were talking recently about a video that somebody posted that was like they like created a narrative where climate change was set in a world. I'm doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So like they were talking about how like fossil fuels were kind of like dark magic. They're
Mm-hmm.
really powerful. They can be used for a lot of great things to make a lot of great things happen, but they also have a lot of negative effects. So it's going
Mm-hmm.
to be like somebody harnessing the power of evil or
Right.
power of dark magic to
Right.
make all these big incredible things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then the world found out like, oh, it's kind of having some other bad effects. Maybe we
Right.
shouldn't. So then other people like scientists, conservationists, everybody involved in making things a little bit healthier for all of us, they're practicing good magic.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to do things. They're doing that with like using the power of wind, using the power of sun.
Sure.
And I'm going to send you personally that link because I think you would
Please
really
do.
enjoy it.
Please do.
Yeah. But I
I'll throw it
think,
in the description if you want.
yeah. I think if we took that kind of mentality of we understand why people use things that are having negative effects, but we also maybe should focus on these other things
Mm-hmm.
because that just sounded like such a fantasy novel the way
Right.
he was describing it. It's like we're all gonna be the avatar.
Right.
We're gonna use water. We're gonna use wind. We're just gonna be out here doing stuff.
Right.
Um and I think like it obviously depends on what aspects of fantasy you're looking at,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Definitely in D&D there's always D&D racism
Yes.
just baked into the world always.
Always. Always.
But I feel like also there's a greater focus on understanding that things are different
Mm-hmm.
and learning how to deal with that difference rather than trying to stamp it out. So going
Mm-hmm.
back to Faye, um, you understand that the Fae aren't necessarily malicious.
Right.
They just don't see things the way that other people do.
Mm-hmm.
So something they find to be a hilarious joke could be a horrible fatal accident for somebody else.
Right.
So, or like something that they see as like a really good boon, you're like, I mean, I guess.
Right.
Thanks though. So, and also different types of magic systems. Like there's a wizard isn't going to walk up to a sorcerer. Well, actually, a wizard might, but a cleric isn't going to walk up to a sorcerer and say, "Your magic's wrong. You do it incorrectly. You should do
Right.
it this way."
Right.
As everybody's got different styles. Everybody's
Mm-hmm.
got different ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, like with the races, have different adaptations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that one thing is wrong. It's that one thing is different.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to interact with them, you have to understand that difference.
Right.
And I think that is something that is not widely practiced. just
Yeah.
in the real worlds.
No, I think that's a very good point. Actually, I really like that.
Thanks.
I'm curious on your opinion on this. Actually, what do you
Okay.
think about fantasy and magic? Do you think that people don't like, people that don't like it? What do you think it is
Mhm.
about it that they don't like?
I think it might be hard to like really grasp onto it, like
Mm,
to find something that really captures them. Because I know that for the opposite, for me, I don't care about science fiction.
mm-hmm,
Like, I love Babylon 5,
mm-hmm,
but that's a television show from the 1990s that
mm-hmm,
uses practical effects. So I
mm-hmm.
was kind of slated
You have
to,
that in.
to
You have
like
that in.
Babylon 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but for me, I just think science fiction is kind of boring because it's it's like magic you can explain. And
Right.
what I like about magic is that you can't explain it. It's just
Yeah.
something that is.
Yeah.
You can understand it maybe,
You can maybe
but you
use it,
can't.
but it's yeah.
Mhm. It's its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Science is magic that humans made, so people that really like science fiction, they might like that aspect of theoretically this is understandable and can
Sure.
be done.
Sure. Yeah.
So for the reason I like fantasy might be the reason they don't, where it's like this is nothing. This has no
Mm-hmm.
concrete sides or solid edges. There's nothing to grab onto. It's just like a purple mist. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, no, dude, that's the point. It's a purple mist
I see.
because purple's the most mystical color.
I see.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, because I think I understand what you're saying. You're saying that like with science fiction, right? For example, it might be easier to latch onto because it could be explained. It could be something that could happen, right? It's maybe man-made or something made it. But with
Mhm.
magic, it's almost like a natural force in our world. Like no one questions. Well, hopefully no one questions gravity. Gravity just is. You don't like. No one made gravity. Gravity is. No one made the magic. Magic is in these stories. Generally
I
speaking.
think, honestly, the way you just said that, I love that so much. That was not what I was thinking, but I
Okay.
might hold on to that for the rest of my life.
Sure, sure.
Um, what I'm thinking is the reason people might not like fantasy, there's going to be all kinds of reasons,
Sure.
but maybe the reason people don't like magic is because it's too foreign.
I
Like
see.
with
Okay.
science fiction, yeah, it's
It's
like, well,
alien.
that's not
It's
real.
yeah, it's
It's like it's not real. Why am I
it's not
gonna
believable,
waste
I
my time on it?
guess. Yeah.
Yeah,
I see what you're
yeah.
saying. Okay.
If people can't like relate to it, it might
Mhm.
be unrelatable.
I see.
So if
Okay.
people can't
That's
relate
good.
to it, if they, that might be why. They might also think like it's for kids
Mhm.
because when kids are little, we freaking love magic and fairies and
I
all
know.
that. So people
Don't grow out of it. Don't grow out of it. Don't do it.
don't grow, don't grow out of
Your
it.
life is better if you
So
don't.
people, magic, friends we made along the way. But people might kind of see it in that way, like, oh, if this is something little kids are really into, then it's something you leave behind as you
Mhm.
get older, and you
Mhm.
need to be more practical. You need to be more focused on things that could actually happen.
Mhm.
Um, but like magic's really fun,
Yeah.
so you can still have fun when you're an adult, guys. It's
It's
okay.
okay. It's possible. Allowed even.
Allowed, encouraged, I would say.
Encouraged. Pushed. In your opinion, I want just your opinion here for this one. What do you think makes a good fantasy? Like, what are the essential components that you need? You can take this however you want, but I want your opinion. What do you think is necessary?
So I definitely have to care about the people in it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, and I know this isn't how everyone feels. Um, if I don't care about the characters, why do I care what they're doing?
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if something is like, oh, this is a well-crafted story with like the events that are happening are really compelling and whatever. It's like, yeah, but the people that are doing it, do I care if they succeed?
Mm-hmm.
Do I care about them at all? Then
Right.
I don't care what they're doing.
Right.
So for me, it's somebody that I can root for, or at least enjoy when they show up on my screen or on my page.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like the magic bit, I really don't have any like criteria. I just love magic.
Okay.
It's not like there needs to be like a really deep, really thought out magic system.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of like if you can make the impossible happen
Mm-hmm.
by saying some stuff or wiggling your fingers and maybe there are pretty lights, I'm here
Mm-hmm.
for it.
So for that, would you say it's like pretty much any magic system or any magic kind of thing you like, or is it more that like what draws you is something that you can't explain? It's like it just kind of happens, or is it both?
like Fey magic is definitely my favorite.
Mhm.
But it might also be because it's like foreign and unexplainable,
Right.
and they're just out here having a silly, goofy time, and it might not
Constantine.
always look like that.
Mhm.
Because I can't think of any magic off the top of my head where I'm like, that's boring, don't care. But I can think of lots of other things where I'm like, that's boring, don't care.
Mhm.
So I just like magic. I just like,
You just like it.
it's just wonder. It just brings wonder, and I like that.
Not enough of that in the real world, I think, sometimes.
Enough of that in the world.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh wow.
That's cool.
It's cool. Magic is allowed to just be cool. And I don't think science is. And I love science.
Yeah.
I'm a big old biological science guy.
I studied biology in
I
college.
love that I did. And I'm thrilled that I can talk to my homeboy Bryce from a different town through our magic computer boxes.
Yes.
Love that. Love that for us. But when I'm consuming media, I can get the magic computer box in the real world. I
Mhm.
can't teleport in the real world.
Right. That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay, here's my last question, and you can feel free to take this in any way you want. I almost suspect you might push back against the question as it is, but we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
If you never discovered magic, how do you think you'd be different as a person? How do you think things would be different for you?
I think it'd be very different. I think like in my day-to-day it would still be kind of the same
Mhm.
because I don't practice magic. I am in a job where science is very important and
Mhm.
explaining how science works and why we do it is very important.
Mhm.
But I think like my imagination wouldn't be as developed.
Mhm.
I think I wouldn't be as good of a writer as I am.
Mhm.
Um, and like for work, I've done writing where you're supposed to be able to connect the audience with what you're talking about and you're supposed to get them to like feel something.
Right.
And I feel like I'm able to do that because I've got a really rich, really developed imagination.
Mhm.
And what captured my imagination when I was little and throughout was
Was
magic.
Labyrinth.
Was Labyrinth. So so if I didn't know how to make that connection between like, hey, if a Goblin King stole your little brother, would you just sit there? Would you be fine with that?
Right.
If I didn't know how to like turn that and make it relatable to
Mhm.
the masses, then I think I wouldn't be a good writer. I think it would definitely affect me professionally because writing is a big part of that.
Mhm.
And I think I would be less enthusiastic about things
Yeah.
because, like you were saying, there's not a lot of just wonder in the
Mhm.
world.
Mhm.
So I'm able to go to books, to movies, to shows to get that wonder, and then that gives me a little extra pep in my step.
There you go.
Yeah.
Any last minute thoughts or anything you want to leave or say?
Um, Within You is a really good song.
Way to listen.
Um, yeah, magic's just really good. It's a really good way to get people in, and then you can just like have a fun, silly, goofy time with magic, or you can like teach them things. So going back to Labyrinth,
There you go.
um,
Required watching for this podcast is Labyrinth.
required watching apparently. It better come
Yes.
up in every future episode as
I
well.
will. I will find a way to work Labyrinth into every single questions that I do from now on.
I
Because
would be
all
so
roads lead to
thrilled. And
Labyrinth.
and it's funny because in a traditional Greek labyrinth, you do eventually get through it. You
Right.
won't get lost. You just
Right.
have to keep going. So all
Right.
roads do lead.
Yep. Yep.
But yeah, like even like that pulled me in because I was like, oh, this music's great. I love the visuals. I love that we got just magic going on.
Mhm.
But also one of the things that like super resonated with me, and if it would fit as a tattoo, I would get it as a tattoo, is it's in Labyrinth when Jareth asks Sarah, like, how are you liking my labyrinth? And she
Mhm.
tells him it's a piece of cake. And he goes, oh. And then he takes off like 6 hours of her time. And she goes, that's not fair. And as you know, that's not fair is early movie Sarah's catchphrase.
Uh huh.
So Jareth goes, You say that so often. I wonder what your basis for comparison is. I wonder what your basis for comparison is. Ooh, that just hit, little
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Because you gotta consider their perspectives of other people and stuff. Like, he
Yeah.
was being a shithead when he said it, but
Right. There's another meaning.
yeah. And Sarah having her breakthrough character moment, she took something from one of the other characters, and the character's saying, like, that's my rightful property. It's not fair. And she goes, no, it isn't. That's just the way it is. And that was her, like, epiphany moment, where that also hit little me.
Yeah.
Right there. Good stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Call me back anytime.
Will do.